Zari sat at her station, her elongated fingers hovering over the control panel as her ship drifted through the endless dark. The glow of the monitors bathed her violet-hued skin in pale blue light, and her twin pupils adjusted rapidly as she scanned the data flowing across the screen. It was supposed to be a routine patrol, an uneventful shift monitoring the trade routes of the outer systems. She exhaled softly, flexing her sensory frills in boredom. The stars beyond the viewport remained motionless, distant pinpricks in the void, unchanged for millennia. Even the occasional passing freighter did little to break the monotony. Then the alert pulsed, a faint but undeniable blip at the edge of her ship's scanning radius. Her eyes narrowed and she adjusted the parameters. An anomaly. Possibly debris, a stray asteroid or a sensor ghost. But as she refined the readings, her pulse began to race. The object was moving. Fast. And worse, it matched no known ship configuration in the database. Zari's fingers trembled as she cross-referenced the signature against ancient archives, those seldom-accessed records buried beneath layers of obsolete data. The system churned through possibilities, rejecting each one. And then the match came. He felt her breath hitch. The signature was human. Her frills pressed tight against her scalp in reflexive disbelief. Oh, it had to be a mistake. A false reading. An echo from some ancient wreck. She forced herself to rerun the analysis, but the results remained unchanged. Humans were myths. Legends whispered by elder scholars, dismissed as fables to frighten hatchlings. Some spoke of them as architects of war, others as ghosts who once strode among the stars before vanishing entirely. According to historical records, they had been powerful, unpredictable creatures of fire and ingenuity. But they were gone. They had been gone for centuries. And yet something was approaching. She hesitated before opening a communication channel to the command center. "This is Ensign Zari," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've detected an unidentified vessel on long-range scanners." Static crackled before a reply came. "Specify." "The configuration doesn't match anything in our current registry," she admitted, her throat tightening. "But it corresponds to an ancient file. It's a human." Silence. Then scoff. "Check your instruments, Ensign. There are no humans." Zari clenched her jaw, bristling. "I already did. 3 times. A longer pause. Then a different voice, one laced with cautious authority. "Transmit the readings." She complied, fingers darting across the controls. Seconds passed, then a minute. The weight of their doubt pressed against her as she waited. Finally, the reply came, this time filled with something sharper than skepticism: concern. "Maintain observation, Ensign. Do not engage. Do not alert the ship to our presence." As if she could possibly do otherwise. The unknown vessel continued its approach, slipping closer with an eerie precision that sent a chill down her spine. It moved unlike any ship she had ever seen, deliberate, yet strangely fluid, as though guided by something more than mere mechanics. There was no reckless acceleration, no erratic course corrections, only the quiet confidence of a hunter closing the distance. Her pulse pounded in her temples. If this was real, if this was truly a human ship, then everything she had been taught was a lie. The legends described them as beings of paradox, ruthless yet compassionate, chaotic yet methodical. They had built empires and torn them down with equal fervor. And then, inexplicably, they had disappeared. Some believed they had destroyed themselves. Others claimed they had transcended to another plane of existence, leaving only whispers behind. No one had ever truly expected to see them again. A new alert flickered across her screen, sharp and urgent. The vessel had changed course. It was heading straight for them. Her breath came shallow as she reached out, fingers poised over the console to raise the shields. She hesitated. No orders had been given to prepare for conflict, and to act without clearance could be seen as insubordination. But every instinct in her body screamed at her to do something. Her commander's voice broke through the stillness. "Zari, establish a secure link. Send a passive scan. We need to know what's on that ship." She obeyed, pulse hammering. The scan swept outward, invisible tendrils of energy reaching toward the approaching vessel. For a moment, the ship remained indifferent, unyielding. Then, a reply. It was not an attack. Not a warning. It was a message. A single line of text scrolled across her monitor. written in a language that had not been spoken in her galaxy for centuries. We are not myths. Zari's blood ran cold. The ship was real. The humans were real. And they knew she was watching. Zari's fingers hovered over the console, her breath shallow as the message pulsed on the screen. We are not myths. The words felt impossible, absurd. And yet, there they were, glaring at her with the weight of history behind them. Her ship's command center had erupted into chaos the moment she transmitted the data. Officers barked conflicting orders, the tension in the air thick enough to crush her chest. Some called for immediate withdrawal, others demanded silence, unwilling to acknowledge the specter that had emerged from legend. Through it all, the human vessel continued its steady approach. No weapons were armed, no signals of hostility detected, yet its presence alone was a threat. Zari's superior, Commander Varric, stood rigid beside her, his silver-hued skin marred by deep worry lines. "They know we're here," he muttered. "They responded directly to your scan." Her throat tightened. "What do we do?" A long pause. The command center, filled with the hum of machinery and tense murmurs, felt colder than before. Finally Varric straightened. "We acknowledge them." Zari's frills flared slightly in shock. The others turned sharply toward the commander, disbelief flashing across their faces. "Sir, are you suggesting we make contact?" one officer asked, voice laced with apprehension. "What choice do we have?" Varric said, his expression unreadable. "They have already spoken. To remain silent would be to surrender the moment." A stillness followed and then begrudging acceptance. Zari swallowed hard as she activated the transmission link. The frequency adjusted, shifting through countless wavelengths before stabilizing. A chime confirmed the connection was open. She hesitated for only a second before speaking. "This is the vessel Teshkel, operating under the authority of the Unified Expanse," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "We acknowledge your presence." Silence stretched unbearably. Then with a crackle the response came. "Confirmed, Teshkel." The voice was deep, steady, unmistakably human. "We have been waiting a long time for this moment." The command center bristled at the words. Zari's hands curled into fists against the console, her skin prickling with unease. "Waiting?" The implication sent a shudder down her spine. Varric stepped forward, his voice measured. "Identify yourselves." Pause. Then the screen flickered. For the first time in recorded history, the face of a living human filled the display. Zari felt the air leave her lungs. The man staring back at them was unlike anything she had imagined. He had strong, angular features, a deep scar carving a path across his cheek. His hair was short, streaked with gray at the temples, and his eyes were sharp, intelligent, filled with something far older than his appearance suggested. "My name is Captain Elias Rourke," he said. "I command the Argosy. And you are the first of your kind to hear my voice in over 5 centuries. The weight of his words pressed down on the room. For a moment no one spoke. Then Varric exhaled, his demeanor shifting from rigid authority to something more careful. "The humans vanished from our records long ago," he said. "Many believed you were gone." Rourke's expression didn't change. "We never left." A ripple of unease passed through the gathered officers. Zari could feel it too, an unsettling realization clawing its way through her mind. If they never left, then where had they been? She found herself speaking before she could stop. "Then why reveal yourselves now?" Rourke's gaze flicked to her, his interest palpable. "Because the galaxy has forgotten us. And that is dangerous." A chill ran down her spine. The way he spoke, the quiet confidence in his tone, it was as if he held knowledge they could barely fathom. Varric narrowed his eyes. "You speak as though you've been watching." The captain nodded. "We have." The words landed like a hammer. Gasps murmured through the command center, hushed voices whispering fears no one had dared speak aloud. Zari's mind raced. The humans had been here all along, hidden just beyond reach, observing as civilizations grew and wars were fought in their absence. But why? What had kept them in the shadows? Before she could ask, another officer cut in, voice sharp with accusation. "If that's true, then why make contact now? What do you want?" Rourke's face darkened slightly, his expression unreadable. "We want to know if the galaxy is ready for us." A heavy silence followed. It was not a threat, not directly, but the implication was undeniable. Zari's pulse thundered in her ears. The stories of human ambition, of their relentless drive to push boundaries, to build and destroy in equal measure. What if those stories were true? What if, after all these years, they were finally stepping back into the open to claim what they had left behind? Varric's jaw tightened. And if we're not? For the first time Rourke smiled. Not unkindly but with something deeper, something that sent a shiver through Zari's bones. Then we wait a little longer. The transmission cut, leaving only silence in its wake. Zari stared at the darkened screen, her heart pounding. The humans were real. They were watching. And they had been waiting for far longer than anyone had ever realized. Zari's breath was shallow as she stepped into the shuttle. The metal beneath her feet felt impossibly solid, heavier than it should have. It wasn't the gravity, it was the weight of her own decision pressing down on her chest. The Argosy loomed in the viewport, its dark hull a stark contrast against the cold void. It was unlike any vessel she had ever seen, a patchwork of function and forgotten history, its surface marred by centuries of silence. This ship did not belong to the present. It was a relic of the past, reaching forward to reclaim its place in the stars. She gripped the control panel as the shuttle's docking sequence engaged. Every instinct told her to turn back, to retreat to the safety of what was known. But the moment the humans had spoken, safety had become an illusion. The galaxy had changed. A hiss of decompression. The shuttle doors parted. The first thing that struck her was the air. It was thick, filled with something foreign yet familiar, a scent that carried weight and memory. Something faintly metallic like old circuits and sealed compartments opened for the first time in years. Then came the sound of boots. Steady, deliberate. Captain Rourke stood at the entrance, his presence as immovable as the ship itself. Up close, the lines on his face were deeper, his gaze sharper. He studied her with quiet intensity, as though he could already see the questions circling in her mind. "Welcome aboard, Ensign Zari," he said, his voice steady. "You're the first of your kind to set foot on a human ship in half a millennium." Her frills pressed tight against her scalp. She wanted to respond, to form words that carried the weight of the moment, but all she could do was nod. He turned, gesturing for her to follow. She forced her feet forward, each step hesitant, uncertain. The corridors were narrow, filled with displays that flickered with outdated scripts. The technology was old, archaic by Expanse standards, yet functional, humming with a quiet resilience. She caught glimpses of the human crew as they passed. Some watched her with open curiosity, others with unreadable expressions. They were not uniform in appearance. Their skin varied in tone, their features distinct, their postures carrying a tension that suggested they were just as uncertain about this meeting as she was. They were individuals, more so than any species she had ever encountered. Rourke led her into a chamber lined with screens. A central console flickered to life as he gestured toward it. "I imagine you have questions," he said. "History has a way of distorting the truth." Zari swallowed, gathering the courage to speak. "The records say humanity disappeared. That you burned bright and then faded. But you didn't, did you?" Rourke's lips curled in something that wasn't quite a smile. "No," he said. "We didn't." He tapped a command and the screens shifted, displaying images that should not exist. Star charts, planetary logs, surveillance footage from across the galaxy. Some of it recent. Some of it impossibly old. "We were never gone," he continued. "We watched. We listened. We learned." Her fingers tightened at her sides. "Then why stay hidden?" He exhaled, leaning against the console. "Because we had to." The images on the screen shifted again. This time they showed something else. Records of conflicts, civilizations rising and falling, alliances formed and shattered. And always the same pattern, power shifting, history rewriting itself. "Humanity has never been good at staying still," Rourke admitted. "We build, we push, we challenge. We fought wars that shaped entire systems. And when we became too unpredictable, too dangerous, the galaxy made a choice." Zari felt her stomach twist. "They erased you. They buried us," he corrected. "The moment they realized they couldn't control us, they turned us into myth. A cautionary tale. The great and terrible force that burned itself out." Her mind raced. The Expanse had always told its people that humanity had been their own undoing. That they had been too reckless, too ambitious. But now, standing here, staring at the undeniable proof that they had been watching all along, she felt something colder than fear settle in her bones. You let them believe it, she whispered. We had no choice, Rourke said. Survival meant silence. It meant stepping back, waiting for the right moment. Her gaze snapped to his. And now is the right moment? He held her stare, unreadable. Now the galaxy is weaker than it thinks. It has stagnated, content in its own lies. That won't last forever. A chill ran through her. She had come seeking answers, but the ones she had found only raised more questions. The humans had never truly left. They had simply waited, gathering their strength in the shadows. And now they were ready. She took a slow breath. What happens next? Rourke studied her for a long moment before answering. That depends, he said. Are you going to tell them the truth? Her pulse quickened. It was a simple question, yet it carried more weight than she could bear. If she reported what she had learned, the Expanse would react. Fear, panic, perhaps even war. But if she stayed silent, she had seen too much to turn back now. Zari exhaled, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I don't know, she admitted. Rourke nodded as if he had expected that answer. Then I guess we'll both have to wait and see. The ship hummed around her, ancient and unyielding. The past had returned, and the future had never felt more uncertain. Zari sat alone in the shuttle, her hands pressed flat against the console, her mind a tangle of thoughts too vast to unravel. The docking clamps had disengaged, yet she had not initiated her return sequence. The Argosy loomed behind her, its dark silhouette against the stars a reminder that nothing in her life, not her training, not the carefully curated history of the Expanse, had prepared her for this. The humans had never vanished. They had simply stepped into the shadows, watching as the galaxy moved on without them. And now they had decided to step back into the light. Her fingers twitched toward the communication controls. She should send a report. She should tell command everything. About Rourke, about the surveillance records, about the truth buried beneath centuries of silence. But as she hovered over the transmitter, uncertainty gripped her like a vice. If she told them, if she spoke a single word of what she had learned, what would happen next? She knew the answer before she could even fully form the question. Fear, panic, war. The Expanse had spent centuries believing humanity was nothing more than a cautionary myth. The return of that myth, breathing and real, would not be welcomed. It would be seen as a threat. A soft chime echoed through the shuttle. An incoming transmission. Zari's breath caught as she saw the source. Not from her own ship. From the Argosy. She hesitated before accepting it. Rourke's face appeared on the screen, his expression unreadable. You're still here. Zari swallowed. I should be leaving. And yet, he said, leaning slightly forward, you haven't. Her frills flexed. You know what happens if I report this? I do, Rourke admitted. But the real question is, do you? He stiffened. The Expanse will react. They will. They will see you as a danger. Likely. Zari exhaled sharply, frustration mounting. You don't seem concerned. Rourke's gaze didn't waver. Because I know what's coming, Ensign. The certainty in his voice sent an uneasy chill down her spine. What do you mean? For the first time since their meeting, a shadow of something unreadable crossed his face. Not anger. Not fear. Something deeper. The Expanse is not as stable as it pretends to be, he said. Borders are cracking. Alliances are fraying. Your people don't see it yet, but it's there. Zari frowned. There had been murmurs, rumors of unrest along the outer territories, whispers of factions growing bolder. But they were just that, rumors. Why would that concern you? She asked carefully. Rourke's expression hardened. Because instability breeds opportunity. And not just for us. The weight of his words settled over her. He wasn't speaking in hypotheticals. Someone else was watching. Someone other than the humans. Zari's pulse quickened. Who? Rourke's jaw tightened. That's what we've been trying to find out. A deep unease coiled in her stomach. The Expanse had always prided itself on its strength, its reach. If something had been moving beyond their notice, beyond even humanity's watchful gaze, then how much of their control was illusion? He straightened. If you have proof of this, then why not come forward? Why not warn the Expanse? Rourke exhaled through his nose. Because they wouldn't believe us. And even if they did, they wouldn't trust us. He wasn't wrong. The Expanse did not take well to threats, nor did it welcome those who challenged its authority. The revelation of humanity's return would already shake its foundations. Adding an unseen enemy to the equation would only accelerate the inevitable. Silence stretched between them. Zari clenched her hands. Then what do you expect me to do? Rourke studied her for a long moment. You've seen the truth, Ensign. That puts you in a position no one else in the Expanse is in. She let out a hollow laugh. That position being what? A liability? A choice. The word hit harder than she expected. Rourke leaned forward slightly, his gaze intent. You can go back, report what you've seen, let the Expanse make its decision. Or, he let the thought linger. You can decide for yourself what the right path is. Zari felt something stir in her chest. Something unfamiliar, terrifying in its enormity. She had never questioned her place in the Expanse before. She had never thought to. And yet now, faced with the truth that had been hidden for centuries, she found herself staring at a crossroads she had never imagined. The weight of it pressed down on her, a silent question waiting to be answered. She exhaled slowly. I don't know what the right path is, she admitted. Rourke nodded as if he had expected as much. Then you're already ahead of most. His image flickered out as the transmission ended. Zari stared at the darkened screen, her pulse thrumming. Her shuttle remained still, caught between two worlds, one she had always known and one she was only beginning to understand. And for the first time in her life she didn't know which one to return to. Zari's hands tightened around the shuttle controls, her breathing slow and measured. The moment stretched out before her, heavy with uncertainty. The Argosy remained in her viewport, a dark reminder of everything she now knew, everything she could never unknow. Her ship, the Teshkel, waited on the other end of the transmission relay, expecting her report. They would demand answers, debrief her, extract every word she had exchanged with the humans, every detail of the ancient vessel and its enigmatic crew. Then they would decide. Not her. She had always followed orders without hesitation, had trusted the structure of the Expanse without question. And yet for the first time, the weight of that obedience felt unbearable. She activated the shuttle's navigation and opened a secure transmission channel. The Teshkel responded instantly. Ensign Zari, a voice crackled over the link, calm but firm. Have you completed your assessment of the unidentified vessel? The moment was here. Zari's frills twitched, but she kept her voice steady. Affirmative, Commander. Pause. And your report? She hesitated. Her mind played through the possibilities, what the Expanse would do if she revealed the truth. They would not ignore it. They would react. The galaxy would react. Her fingers hovered over the console, the weight of Rourke's words pressing against her ribs. You have a choice. She swallowed hard, then made it. The vessel is human in origin, she said, carefully choosing her words. However, it appears to be a remnant of their lost era. There is no immediate threat. Silence on the other end. Then, you're certain? She exhaled slowly. Yes. Another pause. Then a quieter response. Understood, Ensign. Prepare for return. The transmission ended. The decision was made. Zari felt a strange stillness settle over her. She had not lied, only shaped the truth into something manageable, something that would not set fire to the fragile balance of the galaxy. She had chosen caution over revelation. But for how long would that be enough? A soft alert chimed on her console. An encrypted message. Not from the Teshkel. Her breath caught as she saw the sender. Rourke. She hesitated, then opened it. Just 3 words. You bought time. A second later, the Argosy powered down its transmission link. No further messages. No demands. Only a quiet acknowledgement. Zari exhaled, fingers trembling slightly. She had made her choice today, but this was far from over. Because time was not the same as peace. And somewhere in the depths of the galaxy something else was watching. Waiting. Zari docked with the Teshkel in silence, her mind still tangled in the decision she had made. The moment the shuttle doors hissed open, she felt the weight of the Expanse pressing back down on her. The controlled air, the sterile lighting, the measured efficiency of her people. It was all as it should be. And yet it felt smaller somehow, as though she had glimpsed something too vast to forget. Commander Julek was waiting when she stepped onto the deck, his posture rigid, his violet eyes unreadable. He had always been a presence of authority, a reminder of the order the Expanse maintained, but today she felt his scrutiny more keenly than ever. You were delayed, Ensign, he said, voice carefully neutral. Docking sequence required adjustments, she replied, just as even. Pause. Then your report was concise. Zari's frills stiffened. It was accurate. Julek studied her, as if weighing her words against the unseen calculations running behind his sharp gaze. The High Command will review your findings. If necessary, an investigative fleet will be dispatched. Her chest tightened. He had bought time, but it would not last forever. The Expanse would seek answers. And if they found more than she had given them, if they uncovered what she had chosen to withhold. Understood, she said, keeping her voice steady. Julek's gaze lingered a second longer before he nodded. You are dismissed. She turned sharply and walked away, her steps measured, controlled. But beneath the surface her mind churned. Later, alone in her quarters, she activated her personal terminal. The Expanse's vast data networks flowed beneath her fingertips, a sea of information meticulously curated for efficiency, for stability. She had never questioned its completeness before. Now she searched. She delved into old records, classified reports, fragmented whispers buried beneath layers of bureaucracy. Patterns began to emerge. Disappearances in the outer territories, anomalies dismissed as errors, sensor readings that did not match known ships or species. Rourke had been right. Something else was moving in the void. Her frills pressed tightly against her scalp. If the Expanse knew, they weren't acting. If they didn't know, they were blind. Neither answer sat well with her. A quiet alert pulsed on her console. A message. Unmarked. Encrypted. She hesitated, then opened it. No sender. No preamble. Only coordinates. Far beyond the Expanse's monitored borders. Deep into the unknown. Her heart pounded. She had made her choice once. Now the stars were asking her to make another. Zari stood at the viewport, staring into the endless dark. The coordinates still flickered on her console, a silent challenge. She knew what they meant. A path into the unknown. A call to act. Her fingers twitched at her sides. She could ignore it. Report the message, let command dissect it, assign analysts to determine its origin. But something in her gut, something primal, told her that if she waited for the Expanse to move, it would already be too late. She needed to see for herself. Slipping into the dim corridors of the Teshkol, she moved with quiet precision, her mind already mapping the route to the auxiliary hangar. A personal scouting vessel would be logged if taken through official channels. But there were ways to move unseen, ways she had never needed to use, until now. Her pulse quickened as she neared the secured bay, but she forced herself to breathe steadily. The Expanse prided itself on order, and order bred expectation. No one would be looking for signs of defection. Not yet. The small reconnaissance craft sat in its berth, powered down, waiting. It would be missed, but not immediately. A window of hours. Maybe less. She overrode the access panel with a practiced hand. No alarms. No resistance. As the hatch cycled open, she stepped inside, sealing herself within the cockpit's dim glow. The ship felt different beneath her touch, not foreign but untethered. No chain of command. No directives. Just her. The pre-flight sequence hummed, the controls lighting one by one. She entered the coordinates before she could second-guess herself. The thrusters engaged with a smooth burn and then... departure. The Teshkol shrank behind her, its silhouette swallowed by the stars. No warning signals, no immediate pursuit. She was alone. As the ship cut through the void, Zari forced herself to focus. She replayed every detail, every word exchanged with Rourke. If the humans had been searching, then they already knew more than they had shared. And if someone else was watching, manipulating the fringes of the Expanse, she needed to understand why. The coordinates pulled her deeper into uncharted space, past the edges of familiar systems. Time blurred into the soft hum of the ship, the steady rhythm of status updates and fuel readouts. Then the anomaly appeared. Faint at first. A distortion against the fabric of the stars. Not an asteroid field. Not debris. Something shifting, pulsing, as though the very void had been bent around it. Her console flickered with warnings, energy fluctuations, interference, scrambling long-range scans. Zari's breath caught. This was not natural. The Expanse did not know. The humans suspected. Now she was here. Alone. She tightened her grip on the controls and edged forward toward the unknown. Zari's fingers hovered over the controls as her ship drifted closer to the anomaly. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to turn back before she crossed an invisible threshold she could never undo. But her mind, sharp with curiosity and fear, urged her forward. The distortion rippled in the void, shifting like liquid light, bending space in ways her sensors struggled to define. It wasn't simply an absence or a tear, it was something else. A presence. A tremor passed through her vessel. Not turbulence. Not external force. Something deeper, as if the ship itself was reacting to the anomaly. Her heads-up display flickered, static crawling across the screen. Then sound. Not mechanical. Not natural. A frequency that bypassed her ears and went straight into her skull. A whisper, a resonance that thrummed inside her bones. It wasn't words, not exactly, but it carried meaning. She was being observed. Her breath hitched. She reached for the navigation panel, ready to pull away, but the moment her fingers brushed the controls, the anomaly shifted. A rift widened in the center of the disturbance, peeling open like the eye of a vast, unknowable creature. And within it, dark shapes. Moving. Watching. Zari's pulse slammed against her ribs. Not ships. Not anything the expanse had ever classified. Their silhouettes were jagged, shifting as if they weren't bound by the same physics she understood. She couldn't tell if they were alive. A warning alert blared, proximity breach. A tendril of black, pulsing energy reached from the anomaly, stretching toward her vessel with impossible speed. Zari's training took over. She yanked the controls, firing thrusters in reverse. The ship lurched, engines straining as she veered away. The tendril missed, barely, but the rift did not close. The whisper in her mind deepened, pressing against her thoughts like an invading tide. She wasn't just being observed. She was being marked. Panic surged through her. She rerouted all power to the engines, forcing the ship into a hard retreat. The moment she breached the outer edge of the anomaly's influence, the static cleared, the interference faded, and the whispers ceased. But the feeling remained. Something had seen her. And it would not forget. The ship's systems stabilized as she put distance between herself and the anomaly. Breathing heavily, she forced herself to focus. She had come looking for answers. Instead, she had found something watching from the dark. And now it knew she was watching too. Zari's hands were steady on the controls, but her mind was anything but calm. The ship's systems had stabilized, yet the presence of the anomaly still lingered in her thoughts like an echo. She had escaped for now. But she knew instinctively that whatever lurked beyond that rift was not bound by distance. Her flight path was erratic at first, driven more by instinct than logic. She needed space to think, to process. The expanse had no records of anything like this, nothing that explained the unnatural pull she had felt, the way the anomaly had noticed her. Whatever those shadowed figures had been, they weren't simply drifting in the void. They had acted when she drew too close. She ran diagnostics on the ship, scanning for anything, any lingering trace of whatever had reached for her. The sensors reported nothing unusual. No foreign signals. No systems compromised. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. She reached for the encrypted comms link, her mind already weighing her next move. She couldn't go back to the Teshkal. Not yet. The expanse would demand details, expect reports. She would be debriefed, interrogated, her logs dissected for every scrap of information. And if they decided this was a threat, the response would be swift, decisive. Possibly catastrophic. Rourke. The thought struck like a sudden pulse of light in the dark. He had warned her that something was stirring beyond the fringes of known space. He had suspected the truth before she had even dared to look. If anyone could help her make sense of this, it was him. Her fingers flew across the console, activating the encrypted frequency he had used before. The line crackled, pulsing with static for several long, agonizing seconds. Then a voice. "Didn't expect to hear from you so soon, Zari." Rourke's tone was light, but she could hear the undercurrent of tension beneath it. He knew. Or at least he had expected something. "I found it," she said, skipping any preamble. "The anomaly. It isn't just a disturbance. There's something inside it." Pause. "Then you're sure?" Zari's frills stiffened. "It saw me." Rourke exhaled sharply. "That's worse than I hoped." She frowned. You knew about this. I suspected, he admitted. But I didn't have proof. Not like this. Zari's pulse quickened. What are they? The line crackled. When Rourke spoke again, his voice was lower, weighted. We don't know. We've only seen the edges of their influence. Ships that go missing without a trace. Distortions in space where nothing should be. And now you've made contact. The realization settled in her chest like a cold stone. This wasn't just an anomaly. It was a warning. What do we do? She asked, the words tasting unfamiliar. For a long moment Rourke said nothing. Then, we find out what they want. Zari stared at the stars ahead of her, at the void stretching endlessly beyond the ship. Somehow she already knew. They wanted in. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken calculations. Zari's frills twitched, her mind working through possibilities, none of them good. The anomaly had not simply been an accident of spacetime. It was a doorway. And doors only existed for one reason. They're waiting, she murmured, more to herself than to Rourke. His voice came through the calm, low and edged with something she couldn't quite name. Maybe. Or maybe they're already moving. A chill ran down her spine. The expanse controlled vast territories, but it wasn't prepared for something like this. It had built itself around the known, around order and control. But these things, whatever they were, operated outside of that. And if they had noticed her, there was no telling how much longer they would stay hidden. Her fingers clenched around the controls. If we're right, the expanse will have to be warned. You think they'll listen? Rourke asked. Zari hesitated. The expanse didn't ignore threats, but it also didn't handle the unknown well. It would move to eliminate the problem no matter the consequences. She had seen it before. They'll react, she admitted. But that might not be a good thing. A long sigh crackled through the calm. That's what I was afraid of. Zari didn't ask what he meant. She had already begun to understand the way the humans thought. More adaptable than the expanse, more willing to accept uncertainty. And yet, even Rourke sounded like he was grappling with something far larger than he'd anticipated. She checked her navigation. The anomaly was far behind her now, but she could still feel it like a mark burned into her mind. Even if she never returned, it wouldn't matter. The presence had reached for her once. Could do so again. Her jaw tightened. What's our next move? Rourke was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that settled deep in her chest. We find out how long the door's been open. Her stomach clenched. Not if it had been opened. How long? She tapped a new course into her system, sending her ship into the void alongside his. Whatever they were chasing, whatever was already watching from the dark. They were running out of time. Zari's fingers hovered over the controls, her frills twitching with unease. The ship's silent hum filled the space around her, yet her mind was anything but quiet. The data scrawling across the interface before her was both familiar and deeply unsettling. The readings confirmed what she feared. The anomaly wasn't just a fleeting disturbance. It had been there for a long time. Longer than she had dared to imagine. Rourke's voice crackled through the calm. Got something? She hesitated. It's worse than we thought. A beat of silence. Then how bad? Her throat tightened. Centuries. The anomaly has existed for centuries. Undetected. Rourke exhaled sharply. She could picture him running a hand through his unruly hair, his brow furrowed in that distinctly human way. He had spoken of myths, of old human legends about doors that led to places no one was meant to find. Stories dismissed as superstition. She swallowed hard. It wasn't just a myth. A long pause. Then quietly, no. It wasn't. Zari's scales tingled with an unfamiliar sensation, fear. Not of battle, not of an enemy she could fight, but of the unknown. The expanse had prepared her for war, for diplomacy, for survival in the vast reaches of space. But this? She stared at the anomaly's readings. A slow, steady pulse of energy radiated outward, subtle yet consistent. A beacon. They've been waiting, she whispered. Rourke's voice was tight. Then we're already too late. Zari's jaw clenched. Oh, it couldn't end like this. Not without answers. Not without a fight. Her fingers danced over the controls, locking in coordinates. We need to see it up close. I'm going in. Zari. She cut the calm before he could argue. Her ship surged forward, slipping through the void with silent precision. The anomaly loomed ahead, a distortion in space barely visible to the naked eye. It was like a ripple in a still pond, warping the stars behind it. As she approached, her instruments flickered, struggling to process what they were seeing. The moment she crossed the threshold, her breath hitched. The universe shifted. Light bent. And then she was somewhere else. A vast expanse stretched before her, endless and wrong. The stars were unfamiliar, their constellations twisted into alien patterns. Her ship's systems reeled, struggling to adjust. The air inside her cockpit felt too thin, the gravity off-kilter. And at the center of it all, suspended in the void, was a structure. It was massive, ancient, and undeniably human. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The expanse had erased all records of humanity's past beyond a certain point, branding them myths, cautionary tales of reckless ambition. But here it was, a relic of the past that should not exist. A deep, resonant pulse vibrated through her ship. A signal, a greeting, or a warning. She barely had time to react before something stirred within the structure. A shadow moved. Watching. Waiting. She was not alone.